Welcome back to the place where uncomfortable truths live. I've been holding on to something heavy, something that's going to shake the foundation of how you see your past. And I know you're ready to hear it because you're still here, still searching, still trying to make sense of the chaos they left behind. Before we go deeper, if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone in this. And every week I bring you the truth nobody else wants to say out loud. Now let's get into it. You've been carrying a weight that doesn't belong to you, a guilt that was never yours to hold. And today, we're going to talk about how they put it there, brick by brick, lie by lie, until you couldn't remember what it felt like to stand up straight. See, you've been replaying the moments, haven't you? The arguments, the accusations, the times they made you feel like you were losing your grip on reality. You've been analyzing your words, your actions, your responses, wondering what you could have done differently, what you could have said to make them understand. What version of yourself would have been enough? But here's what I need you to grasp right now, what I need you to feel in your bones. You were never the problem. You were the target. There's a difference. A massive, critical difference that changes everything. The problem is random, accidental, fixable. The target is chosen, deliberate, strategic, and they chose you long before you realized the game had started. They saw something in you that threatened them. Maybe it was your authenticity in a world where they wore masks. Maybe it was your kindness in spaces where they practiced cruelty. Maybe it was simply that you had something they wanted, something they couldn't take, so they decided to destroy it instead. Your light didn't fit their darkness, so they convinced you the light was the problem. Let me take you behind the scenes of their operation. While you were being genuine, being vulnerable, being human, they were taking notes, mental snapshots of your fears, voice recordings of your insecurities, screenshots of your breaking points. They collected your weaknesses like some people collect stamps, cataloging each one, filing it away for future use. Every time you opened up, thinking you'd found safety, they were building a weapons arsenal. Every secret you shared became a bullet they'd load when the timing was right. Every moment of trust became evidence they'd twist when they needed ammunition. You thought you were building a friendship. They were building a case. And the most disturbing part, the part that's going to make your skin crawl when you really let it sink in, is that they enjoyed it. Not in some cartoonish villain way, but in that quiet, satisfied way that people feel when they have power over something, when they know something you don't. When they're 10 steps ahead in a game you didn't know you were playing. Your authenticity was entertainment to them. Your vulnerability was their comedy show. Your pain became the highlight reel they'd replay for their own amusement. Now, I want you to think about the times they'd say things that felt off. Those comments that landed wrong, that made your stomach twist, even though you couldn't articulate why. Those jokes at your expense that everyone laughed at while you forced a smile. Those moments when they'd bring up something painful and claim they were just concerned or just trying to help. That wasn't concern. That was reconnaissance. They were testing your boundaries, seeing how much they could get away with, measuring your reactions to calibrate their next move. Every interaction was an experiment, and you were the subject who didn't know they'd signed up for the study. They used something psychologists call triangulation. They'd play people against each other, feeding different versions of events to different people, creating confusion and conflict while positioning themselves as the reasonable one in the middle. They'd tell person A that person B said something about them. They'd tell you that everyone was talking about you. They'd manufacture drama where none existed because chaos gave them control. And here's the genius of it, the truly diabolical brilliance of their strategy. When you finally reacted, when you finally defended yourself, when you finally said, "This isn't okay," they had already primed everyone to see you as the problem. Your reaction to their months or years of provocation became evidence of your instability. Your breaking point became proof of their narrative. They pushed until you cracked, then pointed at the cracks as if they appeared from nothing. Let's talk about the isolation, because that's where they really excelled. They didn't just attack you directly. That would be too obvious, too easy to identify and defend against. Instead, they slowly, methodically cut you off from your support system. They'd create situations where you looked bad in front of others. They'd tell stories that positioned you as unreliable, dramatic, or toxic. They'd poison the well of every relationship you had, dropping subtle comments that changed how people perceived you. Have you noticed they've been acting weird lately? I'm not saying they're lying, but their story doesn't quite add up. I love them, but sometimes I worry about their judgment. These little seeds of doubt, planted carefully in conversations you weren't part of, grew into forests of suspicion. By the time you needed your support system most, it had been compromised. People who once trusted you implicitly now watched you with questioning eyes. Friends who used to believe your word now wanted to hear both sides. And you felt it, didn't you? That shift in energy when you walked into a room. That change in how people responded to you. That new distance where there used to be warmth. But you couldn't pinpoint why. You couldn't identify the source. So you blamed yourself. You thought you'd done something wrong. You tried harder to prove you were okay, which only made you look more desperate, more unstable, more like the person they'd been describing. The isolation wasn't accidental. It was architectural. Here's something that's going to hurt, but you need to hear it. Some of the people you're grieving, some of the relationships you're mourning, those people knew. They saw what was happening. They recognized the manipulation, identified the patterns, understood the game, and they said nothing. Not because they didn't care, but because speaking up meant becoming the next target. Self-preservation trumped solidarity. So they watched you drown while standing safely on the shore, telling themselves that it wasn't their responsibility to save you, that getting involved would just make things worse, that you probably brought it on yourself somehow. They chose their comfort over your truth. And now, in the quiet moments when they're alone with their thoughts, some of them feel that guilt crawling up their spine. But guilt after the fact doesn't change what happened. It just makes them feel better about their cowardice. Let me tell you what they were doing in those spaces you couldn't access, those group chats you weren't added to, those meetings that happened without you, those conversations where your name was the subject but you weren't present to defend yourself. They were building a mythology, creating a character based loosely on you but distorted beyond recognition. They took your moments of struggle and turned them into character flaws. They took your reactions to their abuse and presented them as unprovoked attacks. They removed all context, all nuance, all truth, until what remained was a caricature designed to justify their treatment of you. And they believed it. That's the part that seems impossible but is absolutely true. They told the story so many times, reinforced it so consistently, that it became their reality. The cognitive dissonance required to be the villain while believing you're the hero is resolved by rewriting the entire narrative. You become the antagonist in their story, and they become the victims of your existence. This is how people sleep at night after destroying someone. They don't see themselves as destroyers. They see themselves as survivors of you. The betrayal has layers, depths you haven't even excavated yet. There were people who pretended to support you while actively working against you. Double agents wearing the mask of friendship while reporting back to your enemies. Every vulnerability you shared was intelligence gathered. Every confidence you trusted them with was data collected. Every moment you thought you were healing with a safe person was actually another session of being studied, documented, and exposed. When you discover who these people were, and you will, the betrayal will hit differently. Because enemy attacks make sense. But sabotage from inside the walls, from people who looked you in the eye and said they cared, that's a different species of pain. Now, let's address the gaslighting, because that's where your sense of reality got shattered. Gaslighting isn't just disagreement about facts. It's a systematic assault on your grip on truth itself. They'd do something cruel, then deny it happened. They'd say something devastating, then claim you misheard. They'd hurt you intentionally, then act bewildered by your pain, as if your emotional response was evidence of instability rather than a normal reaction to being harmed. I never said that. You're remembering wrong. You're being too sensitive. You're overreacting. You're making this bigger than it is. You're imagining things. That's not what happened. You're twisting my words. You're the one being manipulative right now. Over and over until your relationship with your own memory, your own perception, your own reality became fractured. You stopped trusting yourself. You started seeking their validation to confirm your experiences. You began to wonder if maybe you were the problem, maybe you were crazy, maybe you were the toxic one after all. That confusion, that self-doubt, that internal chaos was the goal, because a person who doesn't trust themselves is easy to control. A person questioning their own sanity will accept someone else's version of reality. A person convinced they're the problem will accept any treatment as deserved. But here's what they didn't account for. Here's the flaw in their perfect system. Gaslighting requires sustained contact. It needs regular reinforcement, consistent messaging, ongoing manipulation. The moment you created distance, the moment you stepped back from their sphere of influence, their power started evaporating. Your clarity began returning. The fog started lifting. And that absolutely terrified them. Because manipulators need your reaction. They need your confusion, your attempts to defend yourself, your efforts to prove you're not what they say you are. That engagement is the fuel. When you went silent, when you stopped responding, when you withdrew your energy completely, they lost their grip. They became performers without an audience. Magicians whose tricks only work when someone's watching. Your silence was more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Let's talk about what happens next. Because awareness without direction is just organized pain. You know what they did now. You see the patterns. You recognize the manipulation. But what do you actually do with this information? First, understand that confrontation won't give you what you think it will. You imagine that if you could just make them see, make them understand, make them admit what they did, that you'd find peace. But that's not how this works. These people are so invested in their narrative, so committed to their version of reality, that your truth is literally incomprehensible to them. Trying to make them acknowledge what they've done is like trying to convince someone they're dreaming while they're still asleep. You can't do it, and you'll only damage yourself trying. Real closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you accepting that they showed you who they are, believing it, and walking away without needing them to validate your experience. It comes from understanding that some people are so deeply committed to their delusions that your truth can't penetrate. It comes from realizing that their acknowledgement isn't necessary for your healing. You release them, not with anger, not with explanations, just with finality. Second, you need to grieve the relationship you thought you had, not the relationship that actually existed. You're mourning a fiction, a performance, a version of these people that was carefully constructed to gain your trust. The real them, the them that was orchestrating your pain while smiling in your face, that person was always there. You just couldn't see them because you were looking through the lens of your own authenticity, assuming they operated with the same values. They didn't, they don't, they won't. And accepting that, truly accepting it in your bones, is how you start to heal. Third, you rebuild your relationship with yourself. The self-trust they shattered, the confidence they undermined, the reality testing they destroyed, all of that needs to be reconstructed. And here's the beautiful part, the part they never expected. You rebuild it stronger, because now you know what manipulation looks like. You recognize the red flags. You trust your instincts when something feels off, instead of talking yourself out of it. You become ungaspable, unmanipulable, immune to their tactics. And that evolution, that growth, that transformation from target to someone who can spot the game from miles away, that's your victory. Not revenge, not exposure, not making them pay. Your victory is becoming someone they could never touch again. Let me tell you what they're doing now, in your absence. They're trying to figure out why their usual tactics aren't working. They're confused by your silence because they expected rage, expected you to lash out, expected you to give them ammunition for their "see, I told you they were crazy" narrative. Your calm departure, your quiet exit, your refusal to engage has them spinning. They're also, and this is going to sound strange, but they're also missing you. Not you as a person, but you as their source of supply, you as their entertainment, you as their emotional punching bag, you as the person who made them feel powerful. Your absence has created a void in their life, and they're scrambling to fill it with someone new. Watch for this. They'll try to come back, not with genuine apology or real accountability, but with manipulation wearing a remorse mask. They'll say they've changed. They'll claim they've had realizations. They'll offer explanations that somehow still make it partially your fault. They'll suggest starting fresh, moving forward, letting bygones be bygones. This is bait. This is a trap. This is them trying to reestablish access. Don't take it. Because people like this don't change without massive, often professional intervention and a genuine desire to do the internal work. What they're offering isn't transformation. It's a brief pause in their pattern to reel you back in before resuming exactly where they left off. Here's what I need you to understand about your worth. You are not defined by their treatment of you. You are not diminished by their campaign against you. You are not the person they tried to convince everyone you were. Their narrative about you says everything about them, and nothing about your actual character, your actual value, your actual truth. You survived psychological warfare. You endured systematic destruction. You walked through a manufactured hell designed to break you. And you're still here, still standing, still searching for answers, still committed to understanding what happened so you can move forward. That resilience, that strength, that refusal to be destroyed, that's who you actually are. The fact that they had to orchestrate an entire campaign to bring you down proves how powerful you actually were. Weak people don't require coordinated attacks. They fold easily. But you required strategy. You required planning. You required multiple people working together because individually, they couldn't touch you. Your strength threatened them so completely that destruction was their only option. Let that sink in. You weren't targeted because you were weak. You were targeted because you were powerful, and they couldn't control that power, so they tried to eliminate it. Now, here's your path forward. You take everything they meant for your destruction, and you alchemize it into wisdom. Every manipulation tactic you endured becomes a red flag you'll recognize instantly in the future. Every betrayal you survived becomes evidence that you can survive anything. Every moment of gaslighting that made you doubt yourself becomes fuel for trusting your instincts fiercer than ever. They tried to break you. Instead, they forged you. You cut off every avenue of contact, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. You block them everywhere. You remove every possible entry point they could use to reinsert themselves into your life. You build walls so high and so strong that they can't climb over, dig under, or break through. And then, in the safety of that distance, you heal, you rebuild. You remember who you were before they convinced you to doubt everything about yourself. You reconnect with your intuition, your truth, your power. You surround yourself with people who don't require you to dim your light, to be comfortable. You create a life so full, so authentic, so aligned with your real self, that their absence becomes a blessing you eventually thank the universe for. Because here's the truth they never wanted you to discover. Their presence in your life was the problem, not the solution. Their departure, no matter how painful, was actually a gift. They removed themselves from your path, clearing the way for people and experiences that actually deserve access to you. Your healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about integrating the lessons without carrying the poison. It's about acknowledging the damage without letting it define you. It's about seeing clearly what they did while refusing to let it dictate who you become. You are not their victim. You are their survivor. And survivors don't just endure. They evolve. They transform. They become versions of themselves that the person who was first attacked wouldn't even recognize. That's your destination. That's your future. That's the life waiting on the other side of this understanding. So take this information. Use it. Let it clarify everything that felt confusing. Let it validate everything you suspected but couldn't prove. Let it free you from the guilt they trained you to carry. And then walk forward into the life they tried to prevent you from having. Because your story doesn't end with their betrayal. That was just a chapter, a dark one, a painful one, but not the final one. The final chapter is the one you write in your own voice, from your own truth, in your own power. The chapter where you don't just survive what they did, you thrive in spite of it. That's the ending they didn't prepare for, the outcome they can't manipulate, the victory they'll never understand. Welcome to your reclamation.